Our guest this morning is Texas A&M full-time MBA class of 2018, classmate of mine, and a dear friend, Thomas Dowlearn. How you doing today?
Good. How's it going, Ben? Thanks for having me today.
It is a pleasure to have you here. So let's jump right in with our icebreaker question. Thomas, what is your favorite superpower?
So if I could have any superpower in the world, it would be to stop time.
Okay.
I think that that's something that everybody needs, is just to take a quick breather. You know, if I could give everybody 5 to 10 minutes to just stop, think about what you're doing, just take a minute to reflect, ask yourself, are you fulfilled with what you're doing? Why are you doing what you're doing? And also, I think it's a healthy exercise to ask yourself, what are 3 things that you're grateful for?
Oh.
So that's actually something that my fiance, that's a practice that she introduced to me a few years ago, and we've been doing it since every night, and it's totally changed kind of my attitude on a daily basis, and I think it's something that, you know, could really change the world if everybody did it.
What are 3 things that you're grateful for?
Every single breath is a gift. So I'm grateful for every breath, grateful for every opportunity, grateful for my family, my friends, and the list just keeps going on. But those are some of my very basic go-tos.
Do you think that so it's interesting that you said the power to stop time or slow down time instead of super speed, which is more traditional superpower. I wonder if there are 2 types of people in the world, the people who would prefer to be able to move faster and the people who would would want to move time slower. You know, do you think there's some kind of
I think those people are in
there?
New York that like for things to be moving a little faster. I'm on the other end of the spectrum for sure. You know, I'm very slow and methodical. I like to take my time and be thorough, you know, and so that's always been one of my biggest, I would say, complaints, is that I feel like things move too quickly and that we should all take a second to slow down.
Do you think that makes you better as a speaker? Because I'm going to jump ahead here. You've won a couple of awards for speaking, not the least of which was you were named Outstanding Presenter at Venture Challenge a couple of years ago. The Texas A&M, the Mays full-time MBA's Venture Challenge program, you were named Outstanding Presenter. Can you talk a little bit about that? Do you think your preference to speak slowly, to take your time, contributed to that?
I think it did. I think the kind of my slow pace has helped me to become good at a lot of things. Just because, you know, I've always been kind of a perfectionist, and it's going at that slow pace allows me to really hone my skills. You know, what's funny about winning the Best Presenter Award at Venture Challenge was that I didn't really have the confidence in myself that I was a good speaker. I never really thought of myself as that great of a speaker.
Interesting.
And then when I won that award, it really improved my confidence and gave me this sense of pride in my speaking, and gave me that confidence that I can get up there on stage and actually do well.
You and I also studied a book. We did a presentation on a book called The Charisma Myth.
Oh yeah.
By Olivia Fox Cabane or Cabane. I don't know how to pronounce that one, but it did say that speaking more slowly and I think nodding less. I talked about this on a previous show, I believe. And I'm trying to remember the 3 things that she said to do if you want to.
I'm pretty impressed that you even remember that, because yeah, I mean, that was a really interesting, I thought that book was super interesting, right? It kind of broke down charisma into a science.
Yeah. And the funny thing is, I don't think it's necessarily a good thing to like want to manipulate people to like you more, but it is good to understand what gives you presence, what magnetism is really made of. So anyway, you are doing the big kahuna of graduate programs, the MD MBA. So you're going to be a medical doctor, and you already have an MBA, 1 year of business school before starting a full run in medical school. You're almost 3 years into that journey now. First of all, are you a full-on crazy person? And second, what inspired you to do this?
Yes. So Well, first off, I am a little bit of a crazy person. I think that the program does drive you a little crazy at times because it's just pretty intense.
Yeah.
But I do love it. I've been enjoying every step of it at the same time that it's been really challenging. So I was inspired to pursue this path. It kind of first started with two doctors that I shadowed while I was in college, who one of them is a heart surgeon and the other is a obstetric and gynecological surgeon. And they both kind of told me that they wish they knew more about business. And they felt that business was really important to their jobs and it affected them on a daily basis. And so that for me was kind of one of those aha moments. It was kind of a spark moment for me to say, I should look into this and at least consider it.
I see. So you knew that you wanted to do medicine and business was something that got layered on after that.
The business exactly.
Okay.
Exactly.
So for someone who doesn't have any idea what medical school is like, what does the day-to-day look like? I mean, obviously it's a little crazy, but what is it like? Yeah,
so it kind of depends what phase of med school you're in. There's kind of two big phases of the med school experience. Mm-hmm. And the first is called pre-clerkship, which is where you're basically learning through lectures. You have maybe anatomy lab, and it's more of that didactic styled learning.
Sure.
And then the second part is called clerkship or rotations. And that's where you rotate through different specialties of medicine and you're actually in hospitals and clinics working with doctors and interviewing patients and trying to figure out what's going on with them and how to treat them. So the schedule for the first phase, that pre-clerkship, is, you're probably studying between 6 to 10 hours a day. Mm-hmm. And, I take little breaks here and there for myself to eat and just take a sec to work out or do something, to get away from the studying.
Right.
And then, sometimes you have mandatory classes that you have to go to. But I would stream a lot of the lectures because most of them are not mandatory. So that was kind of an interesting difference between the MBA and med school is that you could actually watch them online at your own convenience.
Interesting.
Mm-hmm. Which was, is create your own schedule. It kind of makes it for more independent. You have to be more disciplined, I would say. And then when you get to the second part of med school, which is the clerkship, where you're rotating, in and out of the hospitals, that kind of, it depends which rotation you're on. So for instance, I just finished my OB-GYN rotation, and my hours were, I'd get to the hospital about 5 a.m., and I'd get done around 6 p.m., but now I'm doing pediatrics, which is the hours are a little bit less intense. I'm getting there about 8 a.m., go until 4 p.m. And usually I'll come home, study a little bit, have dinner with my fiance, and then I might have to study or check some emails after that too.
Sure.
So it's pretty busy.
So rotations start pretty early on. And is there a mix of the two? Like, are you still doing lectures and so forth, or is that just for the first year and a half? How do those two play together?
Yeah, so I'm in my second year and second semester of the second year. And this is my first semester doing rotations. And we'll have one lecture a week. Or I should say it's one day of lectures a week.
Okay.
And so it's really mostly being in the clinics or being in the hospitals. And it's very hands-on learning. It's so it's way different from that first stage of med school.
What is... Maybe the answer to this is obvious, but maybe not. What is the most challenging part of all of this?
For me, it's been being able to maintain a life outside of medicine. Mm-hmm. There's been countless times that I've had to say, I can't go on that trip. I can't go to the lake house. I've got to, my buddy's lake house or something. I've got to study, or I can't go do dinner with my parents tonight. Mm-hmm. I need to study. Or even just having to tell myself, you don't have time for a workout today. You're going to have to stay on the grind. Right. Yeah. So that can be really tough, is just trying to find that balance and say, I need a second to step outside of medicine.
Right. So then the next question is, we've talked previously on the show about how the habits that you form in school often become sort of your destiny from a professional standpoint. do you think that a lot of doctors overwork themselves later in life at a time maybe when they no longer have to, just because this is what they know, because it's a habit they learned in undergrad and then in med school and so on?
So yeah, I do think medicine can be all consuming,
Right.
and it can be the one and only thing if you let it. And because the culture is built around working hard, and you're always really expected to be learning and staying busy, I think that it's partly the culture, and part of that's kind of you just learn through watching the people around you as you're in school even. Mm-hmm. That everybody's kind of always super busy, and so you think that's how I need to be. And so yeah, I think that does carry on with people for their whole lives, and they don't ever give themselves that time to take breaks.
Do you think that has there I feel like in business there's actually been a little bit of a pushback on that, the idea that is the only way to be successful. And I think in business there are many people who work crazy hours, and many of those people are outrageously successful. And if you really want to be at the very, very, very top of the business world, you either have to take an enormous risk and have it work out, or you have to work crazy hours, or some degree of both. But you can be very successful without working 80 hours a week. And in business, I think the idea of finding balance and, figuring out ways to work remotely on some things, I think the business world has done a good job of sort of pushing back on the idea that you have to be at your desk from, 8 o'clock in the morning to 8 o'clock at night, if you want to make a lot of money, and if you want to be well respected in your profession. In medicine, has there been a similar pushback?
Not that I have seen per se. One thing that is interesting that I've seen is this huge draw towards specialties that allow for more kind of quality of life, I would say.
Oh, okay.
There's a huge surge towards dermatology and orthopedics, yeah. I think, because those are two kind of professions where you can have pretty good hours and great pay in medicine. And so you're seeing a lot of people going that way now. So maybe you could call that a little bit of a push in that towards that direction. So
it's not exactly a culture change. It's just kind of more of a market change, maybe.
I would classify it like that. Huh. Yeah,
that's really interesting. Mm-hmm. So what is the most exciting part of working in medicine? I mean, obviously, if you get to save somebody's life, that's amazing. But what are the little victories, or maybe big victories? Yeah.
So I have loved just interviewing patients.
Oh.
Just getting to talk with people, hear their story, and try and figure out what's going on. There's a thrill, that comes with trying to diagnose somebody and figure out what's really causing your health issues right now.
Right.
The days just fly by when I get to talk to patients, though.
Uh-huh.
So I've loved that.
Is there a story that you can share? Like something particularly heartwarming or touching?
Sure. So like I was telling you, I'm in pediatrics right now, and I'm working at an outpatient clinic in Humble, Texas. And there was a little 6-year-old girl who came in just for a wellness exam. Mm-hmm. And I was just blown away at this girl's ability to engage with me the entire time. Usually, I'm having to talk to the parents and get some answers about how's your child doing.
Right.
And, we have a series of things we're trying to assess in these well child visits. We're trying to make sure that they're developing the way they're supposed to be, that they're developing healthy habits and things like this. And this girl she was hilarious. She was extremely social. She was answering all my questions. A lot of fun, and before I knew it, I had spent 45 minutes talking to the 6-year-old girl about her life.
Right.
And she was just a lot of fun.
That's great. What is the pin on your jacket for pediatrics?
So yeah, it's actually a pro-life pin, and I'm not strictly pro-life. I think and this is going to be controversial, but I think
let me tell the listeners first. The pin is 2 small silver feet on the lapel of his jacket for anyone who's listening on audio and can't see the video.
It's 2 fetal feet. And I forget the exact age, but they're actually supposed to be the exact size of a baby's feet at, I want to say, like 30 weeks of pregnancy.
Okay.
So it's premature baby, because you want to get to 37 weeks in order to be before you're delivered, if you want to really be healthy and at what we call term. Mm-hmm. But yeah, so I got this. There are various pro-life and pro-choice discussions that go on at the College of Medicine.
Sure.
And they brought these pins one day, and I grabbed one just because I thought it was a beautiful symbol.
Sure.
And kind of my thought behind it is that if we can save a life, I think we should. But
Interesting.
At the same time, and this is going to be controversial, so I also understand that there are families that don't necessarily have the means to raise a child in a nurturing environment, and I sympathize with that. I think we need to respect people who want to make that decision that we are not able to take care of this child. Uh-huh. If we can't get the infrastructure in place to take care of a child, then why would we put the child in this world that's going to be having to suffer for their entire time? So I know it's a controversial opinion of mine that I've kind of developed kind of in the past year and a half.
How do you feel as a man taking a pro-life position? Because I should be clear, I am very pro-life myself, but also I am pro-choice, because I feel like as a man, it is just not my place to tell a woman what to do with her body. And I feel like until an embryo, a fetus, has reached the stage where it could survive on its own, it has to be considered a part of the woman's body. And certainly, I think certainly up to at least 14 weeks, that's the case. And then I think the argument gets murkier after that. But I'm not the expert. Yeah. You're the expert. Well, so tell me your thoughts on this.
Sure. I actually agree with you on that. Babies usually can't survive on their own past about 24 to 25 weeks. If they're born before that, they're probably not going to make it.
Right.
Now, having said that, since I am a male, I think that has pushed me a little bit more towards my stance of feeling like I don't have a right to tell women what they should do.
Right.
Because I'm not going through what they're going through.
Yeah. So you began your university studies with a BBA, a Bachelor's in Business Administration, specifically in management, from the University of Texas at Austin. Outstanding school. Then worked as a quality management and regulatory affairs assistant at Apollo Endosurgery, which is a bariatric medical devices company.
Right.
What was that? Tell us what that job was like.
Sure. So I graduated in the fall of 2014 from UT. Got my bachelor's in business administration management, and then I went and worked for Apollo Endosurgery right after that.
Right.
Which, like you said, they make medical devices for people who are obese and are trying to lose weight.
Oh, okay.
So I was in the kind of quality management and regulatory affairs department there, which was interesting. Definitely not my favorite. I kind of found myself naturally gravitating towards the R&D. I wanted to learn more about the research and development, hear what kinds of changes we were trying to make to our devices and why, or what new devices we were trying to roll out with. But having said that experience I thought was very important for me, because it showed me that I wanted to be on the medicine side and taking care of patients, that the business of medicine wasn't enough for me to find my real fulfillment.
Okay.
Although I did love learning about the devices and all these things and how they worked, I wanted to do more hands-on work where I was actually working with patients and with people.
Okay, but yet you still felt that getting an MBA was an important part of advancing your medical education.
Yes, absolutely. So I did come to recognize, the value of business pretty early on, I'd say.
Right.
I recognized
the
it.
Doctors that you talked about earlier.
Yes, so with the doctors, and even when I was studying business in undergrad, this is kind of a funny story. I went into business almost more as a safety plan. Originally, in case medicine didn't work out, because I knew it was going to be extremely competitive and that it's not a guarantee that you're going to get into medical school. It's
true.
It's a very rigorous process. Just going through all the courses, going through the application process. They really filter down who ends up getting into med school. So, but what surprised me was that I ended up loving business. I didn't think I would love it as much as I ended up really loving it.
Huh.
But what resonated with me pretty early on was that business is about meeting people's needs, and how do we do that in the best possible way.
Right.
And that's something we try to do in all areas of life. Healthcare is no different. We're trying to find a way to meet the patient's needs. That's the customer.
Let's delve into your MBA experience a little bit. What do you think, if you had to get pretty specific, you said that you knew coming in that business was going to be an important part of, advancing your medical career. What do you think was the most surprising thing that you learned that will help you as a doctor or, maybe an administrator, but it sounds like you're probably not going to go the administrative direction. Who knows?
Yeah,
but what's
see.
the most important thing that you learned from business school? Be specific.
Sure. So probably one of my favorite lessons that I learned of all time while I was in the MBA program came from Dr. Lynn Berry, who teaches services marketing here at A&M. And he taught the importance of being generous in business. We had to read a book called Setting the Table by Dan Myers, who created multiple restaurants and was super successful.
Okay.
I'm blanking on, I think Shake Shack was one of them. I'm forgetting what the other one was, the other restaurant. But
God bless that man.
Yes, indeed. But, one of the things in the book was about a time when his restaurants were having some difficulty, and it was shortly after 9/11. A lot of people had, the economy was kind of taking a hit. A lot of people were being a little conservative with how they were spending their money at the time.
Sure.
And not as many people were eating out, actually. And what he did was he started to donate, and he became very generous in that time period when they were hitting a kind of a business lull. They got engaged in some charities and donated food into, big kind of charitable events and things like that, and kind of put their name out there and showed that they were trying to support people that were going through tough times. And it helped ultimately boost their business. But I think, you shouldn't just be generous in times of difficulty. I think being generous at all times is one of the most important things that we can do when we have the ability.
It's interesting that he chose to respond to adversity by giving more money away.
Right.
Or did he say specifically what turned him in that direction in a time of trouble?
So yeah, it is pretty counterintuitive. And unfortunately, my memory isn't good enough to remember exactly what his thought process was. I do just remember him saying that part of it was driven by the fact that his heart was going out to the people that were having a really tough time.
Oh.
And he wanted to do something to help them. So it started from kind of a good place, Okay.
So then moving forward in your MBA education, you were also an Aggie's in Business student consultant in 2017. What did that entail?
So yeah, that was a student organization that I joined while I was in the MBA program. And it was me, and I think there were at least 5 other MBA students in the group, and we had 3 undergraduate business students under us. And we provided just basic consulting services we had 3 clients at the time that I was in it. One of them was actually the College of Medicine. Another one was a landscaping company. And the last one was a business that would walk your dog. It was a dog walking business. And I remember the dog walking business, they were just trying to kind of improve market awareness about this service in College Station. They wanted more people to know that this was something that they were doing. So we were trying to give them advice on how do you promote this business and how do you market this. And then with the landscaping, it was a lot of kind of doing some number crunching for them. They needed help figuring out their finances and accounting. So we did a little bit of help with that. And the College of Medicine, they were trying to start a new initiative, and they wanted just kind of a basic business plan on how to start that initiative. So yeah, it was a really interesting experience.
I'm very familiar with the dog walking business model, having lived in LA for several years. There are so many dog walking businesses in that city. But so any fun stories from working with those businesses?
I wouldn't call this one fun, but it kind of interesting. That was actually an interesting experience where I did encounter some failure, and I wouldn't say my biggest failure of all time, but I was working pretty intimately with the College of Medicine project,
Right.
and felt like I didn't know what I needed to know to really be as valuable as I wanted to be in that project. And the project ended up getting canceled before we even finished it. We provided kind of a mock business plan to them, but and largely that was due to the deans turning over while we were working on the project, and so the new dean came in and said we're not going to do this anymore.
Okay.
But it still just felt like a little bit of a failure to me because we didn't finish what we started.
Oh. Yeah, that's unfortunate.
Yeah.
So what's the biggest difference between the full-time MBA program and med school?
Yeah, so I would say it's just the sheer quantity of information that you have to try and learn and master in medical school. With the MBA program, I felt like I was able to learn at least all the really important things I needed to learn very well. Whereas in med school, it's just so incredibly complicated, and there's always more you could be learning, and you're trying to wrap your mind around just a massive amount of information and retain it. So that's been one of the biggest differences, and certainly a big challenge with medical school.
As a longtime student, what's the most interesting thing you've noticed about learning or about yourself as a learner? I ask because you've been described as a furious note taker.
Which I think that's pretty funny. I've never thought of myself as a furious note taker either. But I think one of the most important things I've learned about just education, period, about learning is the power of a story. I think, I learn the best when I'm either reading a business case, a story, and I'm able to really see how these concepts are applying, or if it's a patient story and I'm seeing this condition in real life and experiencing it. Those are the times that I really learn, as opposed to the classroom setting, which I know academics might not like that message as much.
Well, I do think that there has been an increased awareness in academia of the value of narrative in getting points across. I think I read that where I really became aware of how important this was in every aspect of our lives was, I think, when I read A Whole New Mind, written by, I believe, Daniel Pink, and he talked about 6 different paradigms for learning, but story was kind of the most important one, I think, and sort of the one that unified all the others, at least in my opinion. So you talked a little bit about finding a way to have a life outside of medicine. What techniques have you employed? Like, if you had like a try this one weird trick to have a life outside of medicine, what would it be? If you were giving advice to someone coming into medical school and you were to say, you wouldn't think to do this, but try it, it might really help you, what would that be?
Yeah. So I think this is the basic thing that I've actually told this to a lot of people kind of in the class below me, is when you're most stressed and you just are flustered, you feel like you can't focus and study anymore, go take 5 minutes and walk around the building.
Okay.
Give yourself some fresh air, take a second. This is something that I don't think a lot of med students think of it this way, but you have to actively choose to not study because, like I've said kind of multiple times here, you could always study. Every waking moment you could spend studying,
right,
and you'd still have more to learn in medicine.
Uh-huh.
And so you really have to make that active decision that I'm going to do something else and give myself the gift of time and just do something to get away from this. But yeah, something that I think, and this isn't necessarily a weird trick or anything, but something that really helped me as well is that I started to use a planner.
Okay.
I first kind of would write my top priorities, what were the things that I really needed to get done, and I would plan out my entire week at a time. And so I would get very specific and say from 8 a.m. to 8:45 a.m. that's my morning routine, time to myself, and then from 9 a.m. to 11 get a lecture done. Like I would get that granular, and that's what works for me. I know that there's other people that they don't need it to be that structured. They just need to kind of write out a list of to-dos, and then they can kind of work their way through it. So whatever works for you, but I think when you write it down and you have something that you can tangibly look at, it'll help you kind of stay on track a little better.
Yeah. I talked a little bit about time management in a student speaker series speech.
I remember that. I was there for that.
And so did it help you? So one thing that really helped me in the MBA program was figuring out ways to create big blocks of time and things that would not, blocks of time that would not be interrupted, because it helps me if I'm trying to do like really deep study on something. 40 minutes doesn't help me at all. An hour and a half helps me a little bit. 3 hours helps me a lot. And 4 hours is like, that's where I get my best work done. Do you find you're the same way?
I do. And actually, I'm glad you brought that up, because I took some of those ideas that you mentioned, some of the suggestions that you threw out in that talk, and I still use them today.
Oh, that's great.
One of them that I remember and that I use all the time is, if, you've got 30 minutes, how are you going to spend it? If you had to choose between studying or taking care of other to-dos or emails.
Right.
You recommended that take care of emails or take care of little to-do items that, you can maybe get done in that 30 minutes, as opposed to trying to study, because it's going to be really hard to get yourself in the right mindset in that 30 minutes and really learn something. Mm-hmm. And so I do that. If I've got like a 30-minute gap, it's usually I'll spend that time, like I said, catching up on emails or doing something else.
That's good. I'm so happy that helped you. So it seems like one of the things that's really important in this day and age, as medicine, many things are becoming more specialized. How would you advise patients, consumers of healthcare, as non-experts to become the captains of their own health ship, so to speak?
Yeah,
to take care of themselves.
That is a great question. I think actually that's one of the things that I'm hoping to make a little bit of an impact in healthcare myself, is figuring out how do we shift some of the power from the physicians and the healthcare providers to the patients. Because I do think right now, the way the system is run, it's insurance has kind of the almighty power right now in healthcare.
Follow the money.
And then you get your providers who kind of dictate, this is when I can see you, to the patients. So the patients don't have that much control over, they can schedule things out, but it's still, I think the power still lies with the physician. But yeah, I think it's important for patients to come to a visit with a doctor with questions. Do a little bit of research before you come in on what's going on with you, and come prepared, with just burning questions that you have before you get there. Because a lot of times it's hard to digest all the information that a doctor is going to tell you. And that's something that I've noticed already just in the past couple months of being in clinics and hospitals, is that a lot of times it looks like patients get overwhelmed with all of this information they're getting told. And a lot of it's very, important information, very consequential to their lives. It's potentially things that, are going to change their lives forever. And so the more mentally prepared that you can be coming into a visit and interaction with a healthcare provider, the better off you're going to be, the more power you're going to have, and just be ready to ask questions. Because, as providers, it's our job to answer your questions and your concerns. So if you come with them, we will address them. And if you feel like they're still not being answered, then ask for someone else who can answer your questions.
Sure.
Because you deserve an answer, I believe.
You mentioned a moment ago, do a little research before you go see the doctor. In your opinion, what are the sources that people really should be trusting? Because when you tell the average person, do a little research, the place they're going to start is Google. What should they be searching for, and where should they be searching for it?
So one of my all-time favorites, and one that I'd probably most highly recommend, is the Mayo Clinic website. Right. They put a lot of information out there about various medical conditions, and they seem to communicate it in a very easy to understand way. And they're reliable. You can trust the stuff they're putting on there. So that's one. Medscape is usually pretty good, and WebMD is usually pretty good. But also, something. Now this is something to kind of hedge this recommendation too, is if you're going to do the research, still try and keep an open mind and listen to the physician, because the physician has been studying these things for much longer than you have. You might have just spent a couple of hours reading these things online, but a physician's been studying these things for years. Right. So still trust your physician as best as you can. Ask questions if you still have them. I know that this is something that a lot of a lot of physicians are kind of having to deal with now, and they're not as used to this. and it's becoming more of an issue in healthcare, is that patients are not trusting their physicians, and they're doing all this research beforehand, and they've made up their mind. They know what they have, and they won't listen to what the physician thinks they have. So, I just recommend, if you're going to do the research, which I think you should, try and also keep an open mind and try and have an open dialogue with your doctor about what's going on as well.
It seems like bad business to show up for an appointment with the doctor and then tell them that everything they're saying is wrong. Yes, you should be, you to a degree, you have to make, as a patient, you have to make the decision. Almost every time your doctor will say, I recommend doing this, and it's kind of your choice whether you do it or not. Every now and then the doctor will say, you need to go into surgery or you're going to die. And it would be malpractice of me not to emphasize with every fiber of my being here that you need to do this. But most of the time, doctors don't say that to you. They say, I recommend this course of treatment. Having said that, it just seems, if you don't respect your doctor enough to listen to them, then find a doctor that you do respect enough to listen to, right?
Agreed.
Yeah.
And something that just came back, we're going to have to maybe cut some of this. Something else that I wanted to say about kind of what we were talking about earlier with what can patients do to take some power.
Sure.
Some simple recommendations that I'd also want to give people before they go and see the doctor is to think about kind of some of the important things that a doctor is going to ask them, which are, when did your symptoms start? Has anything helped, or has anything made it worse? Do you have, pain? And if so, where are you feeling the pain? How bad is the pain? Is there anything you were doing, maybe something different you tried recently, something that you don't normally do in your normal routine or schedule? Or
something different that happened to you.
Or something that happened to you. These are important things to be thinking about before you go see your doctor, because the more clearer the answers you can give around these kinds of questions, the better they will be able to diagnose what's going on.
Right.
And it'll also help you think through kind of your own status and figuring out maybe your own hypotheses about what caused this.
That's really smart. And also, so being clear usually means being specific. Like, not
Correct.
Just my body hurts, but my shoulder hurts right here.
Exactly. Pointing to exactly where you can feel
right
it.
outside the rib cage, whatever it may be. The more dialed down the information can be, the more it'll help your.
Agreed. The more specific you can be, the more information you can provide, period. The more likely you're going to get the care that you need.
So do you think that, holding income aside, do you think that people who are maybe a little more educated get better health care just because they are better able to elaborate what their issue is?
I think actually that does have a pretty decent impact. People that are articulate and know how to describe what's going on usually can get better care. It's the people that are very vague and they can't describe anything that it makes it really hard to figure out what's happening with you.
Right.
So
let's take all of this a little bit big picture as we start to close things out, and then we'll move to some rapid fire questions. But how do you think that medicine and business are evolving together? And you're uniquely well positioned to describe that symbiosis. What are your thoughts on where this all goes?
Yeah, so I think we're making a push to become a little more patient-centered in healthcare. And that's really where you find the intersection of business and healthcare, is putting the focus back on the customer, which is the patient.
Right.
Now, like we were kind of discussing earlier, I do think that there's still this power struggle. We have insurance that's dictating a lot of what doctors can do and can't do, which is impacting their ability to give the care that they want to give to patients. So how do we strike a balance there? How do we find a way to keep insurance in place? Or, if it was up to me, I would honestly want to minimize insurance and its role. But how do we use the good parts of insurance while also respecting the needs of the patient and meeting those needs as best as we can.
Right. I think one of the challenges with the insurance business, and I say this actually from the other side of that particular discussion, when I was getting my entertainment career started in California, I worked as an insurance agent, and my license was active up through a couple of years ago. And so I think the biggest challenge with insurance is that people don't understand how it works. And group health insurance, unfortunately, as much as it is great, it was, especially pre-Obamacare, it was great to have something that was guaranteed issue. And what that means for our listeners who don't know what that is guaranteed issue is a type of insurance that you couldn't be declined for if you had a pre-existing health condition. And before Obamacare, some privatized individual health insurance, they could turn you down if you had had a previous heart attack, or if you had had cancer recently, or any one of a number of other health conditions. You could just be turned down for insurance, and it was impossible to get individual health insurance. And the plans that were available for people who had pre-existing conditions were not necessarily the best plans. And so now with Obamacare, everything is guaranteed issue. But before 2014, that was not the case. And so group health insurance, employer-sponsored health insurance, did some really good things in that it gave people a way to get insurance if they couldn't get it on their own. But now people think of insurance, especially health insurance, as something that I have so I can go to the doctor. And yes, that's a function of insurance, but it's not really what insurance is for. Insurance is not for copays. Insurance is an indemnification against a big risk.
Right.
Insurance is in case something happens. And so, being able to go to the doctor, yes, but honestly, I think doctor visits, it would almost be better if insurance did not include doctor visits. Like just a basic trip to the physician.
Mm-hmm. Why can't we make that something that everyone can afford?
Right.
I think that's a big task, and a goal of mine, if not one of my biggest dreams, is to how do we find a way to make healthcare more affordable for your average consumer?
Right.
Because if we can reduce the costs of healthcare, we can give a little more power to the consumer, and help them actually be able to pay for these things that they're getting treated for.
Right. Okay. Yeah, obviously a lot more to mine there, but let's move to some rapid fire questions. What do you consider your most valuable failure, as briefly as possible?
Not getting into medical school the first time around.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. It was the first roadblock where I wasn't good enough to make it to the next step of the journey.
That's fascinating.
I had to really think about, is this what I'm cut out for?
Because you're a star student. I mean, I'm going to embarrass you on the air in front of everyone. But that's interesting to me that you didn't get in the first time. We'll talk more offline about that.
Sure.
What do you think is people's biggest misconception of you?
I think it's that I've got it all together and that I'm super smart. I don't have all my ducks lined up in a row, and I don't have some master scheme for how I want to, become a superstar or anything like that. I just, I'm learning as I'm going, and I'm giving it my best, trying to take advantage of opportunities as they come. But, it's definitely just a learning process for me.
If you could have anyone as a mentor for one day, who would it be? And to clarify, you can choose a religious figure, but not from your own religion if you are religious.
Okay. Fair enough. If I could pick anyone from throughout history, it would be, and this is going to sound a little funny, but it would be Abraham Lincoln.
Okay. I
think he might be the greatest leader that the world has ever known.
Oh.
And I say that for a couple of reasons. I think he is he's a leader who led by principles, and he stuck to those principles throughout his entire leadership.
Sure.
And he believed first and foremost in equality for everyone. And he's responsible for the Emancipation Proclamation and the end of slavery. So that, I would say, he succeeded in that aim. he also is largely responsible for keeping this country together,
right,
rather than letting it divide at a time when it was very divisive.
It's so interesting how the legacies of some historical figures have aged really, really well, and others have aged really, really badly. Abraham Lincoln's legacy has aged particularly well,
Right.
probably in 2019. So it's a great answer. What is your fondest memory of Texas A&M?
So yeah, this was a tough one for me because I have just a ton of fond memories of A&M, both in the MBA program and in med school. But there's one that does stand out for me, and it was kind of an unexpected story. But there was a classmate of mine in med school whose dad suddenly passed away, and it was completely unexpected.
Oh.
And it was really tragic. And the class rallied together to support him. They got cards for him. We put together a fund and ended up paying for to have meals delivered to him for the next couple weeks.
Mm-hmm.
And that to me was what A&M is all about. To see the class rally together like that and support somebody who was going through a tough time.
Mm-hmm.
That's why I'm here at A&M, for that sense of community, for the family that we have here.
Right. The way that this community handles tragedy is just always first class.
It really is. I don't know how many schools are out there that, the students would respond the same way.
Right. Quick question about that. We all fear, to some degree or another, the idea that we or someone close to us would go to sleep and never wake up. And we talked earlier about the importance of being the captain of your own ship health-wise. When something like that happens, is there, from a medical standpoint, sometimes we don't know what happened. Sometimes we don't know cause of death. But if there was something people could do to address the biggest risk that you have in terms of going to sleep and never waking up, would it be echocardiograms? What would it be? Is it just going in for your annual physical? Is there something to try there that will help people maximize their chances of living to be a little older?
Yeah, that's a cool question. And I think at its most fundamental level, healthcare at the end of the day is about how do we avoid death.
Yeah. Or at least push it off.
At least delay it.
Yeah.
Delay it as long as we can. But yeah, probably the one single piece of advice that I could give if you really want to try and maximize your longevity would be just don't smoke, which I know is such a cliche answer, but smoking is just horrible, and the things it does to the body are just terrible. It's pretty remarkable how much it really messes up your body.
Okay.
And exercising, of course, these are very cliche standard answers. I don't know if I have one single thing that I could say, because health is so complicated, right? There's so many,
Sure.
You've got to be keeping in check a lot of things for your health. But seeing your doctor, going on an annual basis to see a doctor is a good thing.
Right.
Because the earlier you can catch things, the better off you're going to do.
Right.
It's when we catch things too late that it really becomes an issue.
So everyone jokes about vaping. Is vaping a lot better for you than smoking, I guess?
Unfortunately, it's not, because it's packed with, it's more concentrated with nicotine than cigarettes.
Okay.
It does have less carcinogens, which are, chemicals that cause cancer.
Right.
But the nicotine in there has effects on your cardiovascular system that are pretty detrimental. So although we think vaping it's definitely not healthy, I'll put it that way. Is it better than cigarettes? Maybe. I think there's still some data out there they're trying to look into and see.
Okay.
But yeah,
Interesting.
it's not as healthy as I think people make it out to be.
Not the answer I would have expected. All right, so we close each session with some good bull. This is an opportunity to recognize someone else for something good or great they have done. Do you have anyone you would like to send some good bull?
Yes, of course. I love giving good bull. When I was in the MBA program, I always tried to give as much good bull as I could. And first, I want to give some good bull to my fiance, Warner Bowen. She, knowingly or not, has taken on this journey with me. And she's had to sacrifice a whole ton for me to get to this point as well. So I thank you and I love you, Warner. And I want to give some good bull to my family, my parents, my grandparents, because they've supported me on this whole journey. And, I wouldn't be here today if it wasn't for their encouragement and their unconditional love and support. And then lastly, I want to give some good bull out to you, Ben, and to you, Shannon.
Oh, that's
it's
very kind.
Great to see y'all. Thank y'all for this huge honor to be here today. I've really enjoyed this.
Yes, well, it's been a pleasure having you here. I'd like to send some good bull. I got a text from a friend overseas who listened to a previous show and had some kind things to say. So, and was a previous teammate of mine. So, Arco, I really enjoyed working with you, my friend. Arco Basu was an MBA classmate of ours as well. Great guy. And thanks for the text this weekend, Arco. That was really nice of you.
Thank you so much for watching. If you would like to stay up to date on our latest videos, be sure to subscribe and hit the bell icon to receive notifications. If you're in a rush or on the road, you can still join us on iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you find your podcasts. If you want to learn more about us or our guests, please visit our website at mays.tamu.edu/podcasts. Also, please check out Mays Business School's academic programs. They're the sponsors of our show, and you can find them in the description. Thanks, and gig 'em.